there's such a challenge in terms of consumers want to protect their privacy, and as I've said, in a financial institute, it must be that much more so, the challenges, and regulations are constantly changing, privacy concerns are there, so there's a lot going on. We're going to talk about that, but before we get into that, we need to know a little bit more about you and your role at Chase.
Sure. So I head up 2 different divisions, programmatic and then advertising operations, which is what most people call it. In the firm, we call it tagging and trafficking. So we do all of the work within the ad server, and then we also tag just about every single page that exists for the firm.
Okay, definitely a long title there, but now, as you explain it.
I've been trying to shorten it for years.
It's like we just barely fit it on. But so, and again, when we're talking about safety, and that's, I know, your biggest concern. That is something that you're really dealing with right now. And when you try to, before we get into the challenges of really dealing with that, what are you doing? What are you putting in place to first initially deal with those safety issues?
Yeah. So for us, the brand safety, we think about it in 2 pillars. Brand safety for us as a firm, and then brand safety as it pertains to making sure that our consumers feel safe. So in both pillars, it's really important for us that it truly is the foundation or the chassis in which everything that we do sits. So over the past 2 years or so, especially with the enforcement of, California Privacy Act and, changes to the way that we measure and look at brand safety, we've really evolved our shop to focus on making sure that we're not just looking at what the interpretation of the law is today, but those fringe gray areas that are not necessarily defined, and then figuring out for us what the approach is. Usually as a firm, we are on the side of conservative, which I know annoys some of our vendors, I'm sorry, but we do think that it just allows for us to be at the forefront and the safest to then figure out how to play in the space a little bit more and then innovate.
So now when you're dealing with all of this, I mean, you've always had safety measures in place, of course, and as people get smarter and technology advances, you need to then up your game.
Yep.
What have been those biggest challenges?
Oh my. So I guess you could say it's job security for me and my team, which is good. But when we think about how tech works, the goal is to make sure that we try to be as quick and agile as we possibly can be. So we're always gonna have instances where we may see an article come out, not the path that we really enjoy, but we learn from those articles, and then we also take it a step further and think, okay, well, if you're thinking about it from this lens, or that was that breach, what is the next thing? Will we ever get 5 to 10 steps ahead? No, but at least if we think about 2 steps ahead, we can make sure that when we get to that second step, we're then 5 steps ahead. So we really do focus on what is happening now, how that can then be pivoted, or what tech can be built quickly on top of that we need to account for, and then we change our processes to make sure it matches.
So we have the innovation happening, and as you said, your vendors may not be thrilled with your speed of it, but you talked about it a little bit, but even more so, like, how do you reconcile the fact that you want to do these things, especially, in marketing, and you want your bank to stand out, you want to take advantage of all the things that are out there, but you have to keep those concerns in mind. So how do you kind of reconcile those?
So for us, like I said, brand safety is always going to be the foundation. After that, we can play as much as we want, figure out those gray areas, and then go from there. So a really good example is, for us, blocking is always going to be tantamount and important. For base media, blocking is always going to be required for us. Not fun for everyone, but we also know that there's technical components that we can't guarantee. Then we build the exceptions on top of that. So when we want to do amazing things for the US Open, or we want to do content sponsorships, we play in that space of understanding and building the science to the risk. So what we can do is say, if we're going to run a newsletter, we can't run with blocking tags. However, we know the acceptable percentage of risk because we've run it before, and then I can then report to our stakeholders and our compliance leads and our risk officers and say, I expect for our brand safety to take a hit of X points because we're running this type of media. Are you aligned? And as long as they say yes, and we can show that it's still driving measurable awareness, measurable output for conversions, and at the end of the day generates an account open, then we're fine.
So bringing back to a little bit of what you said, you need to test it out. Are you doing everything internally first before actually putting it out there?
Correct. Correct.
So is there, like, by the time you, like, how fast can you do that? In the sense that innovation is quick, you know, and
Innovation is quick. Yeah.
by the time you test it and get it out there, maybe there's the next one happening. So you usually a step behind, or are you able to sort of bypass it and get a little faster with it?
We are proximate in our decisions in terms of when we're a step behind versus when we're willing to take the risk and step forward. As a firm, we've taken the position of if we cannot measure the risk, we won't take that chance. So, and we've generally been proven right. So there are areas where we are going to be a little more aggressive in terms of alphas and betas and, you know, products that are being offered to us for new and upcoming vendors and platform providers. But there's going to be other areas where we're just going to say, absolutely not, we're not going to take that chance.
Speaking of other areas, as Corey mentioned, the big buzzword, AI, and you can't not incorporate it today, but again, there's a challenge there. So we'll talk about first how you are using AI.
Sure. So we've actually built the functionality for ourselves. So we've layered on all of our expectations from a risk, controls, compliance perspective. What that allows us to do is play in the space of AI without putting us at risk and also keeping it within our walls. So we don't use the open source products widely. We pull it in-house, and then we make sure we're very methodical in terms of how often we update. We've done, I mean, I think our teams are super excited, and they really, like, the use cases that are coming from our teams right now are amazing. But what we are doing is spending more time looking at where other areas of the bank are using it and how we can pivot to use it as well. Because we are a financial firm, and if everybody remembers, programmatic is called trading for a reason. So we have the ability to sort of look at what our financial traders are doing and say, how can we pivot that and use it for ourselves?
Challenges, what have been the biggest struggles?
Not a struggle. I think there's a level of excitement within our team.
A great way to avoid this.
I would say our team is super excited. Our team wants to do everything in AI. So that measure and balance of how can we do it and continue to be agile while being safe is probably the biggest frustration right now. Like I said, they've got a list of use cases. They want to do everything in AI, but we have to make sure that we keep the firm safe.
Well, and so, as you continue to say, and we know, safety is
all the time.
A major concern, always a part of it. But another one of your passions, or something that you really feel strongly about, is DEI. And you actually were even a driving force in the Diverse Spend Initiative. Talk about that. That DEI, I don't want to say it but it can be a buzzword.
Yes.
And there's ways to do it and ways not. Talk about where you do it and how it's authentic and how it really makes a difference.
Yep. So we knew within Programmatic that we had the largest area for growth. We were allowed and given the opportunity to really extend out our allow list, help work with, you know, our offices and compliance teams, et cetera, to get additional audiences in place to be able to extend our spend out. So we really focused on building pillars that made it not just diverse owned, but diverse targeted, and then also what we sort of call in the spirit of. The main focus, and for me what was really important, is being on both sides of the industry, working in small publishers or working with folks who don't necessarily get to spend as much time as I, as now a large advertiser, would be able to do. I have the ability to walk into a room or, you know, during my weekly session with IAS to say, hey, I'm noticing measuring this partner is not quite right. What can we do? What can we do to better the tech? And it really is something that, for me, is super important, because you have these top 20 folks who we're gonna end up measuring all our spend against, but that doesn't help the long tail. It doesn't help these publishers who really wanna grow their business. And in order to grow their business, they need advertising spend. And we are duty bound to make sure that we are in front of these folks. So we modified our allow lists. We work with our partners to make sure that they're measuring appropriately. We have sometimes hard conversations about how they drive traffic to their sites and how they can do that in a better way. So it really is sort of ingrained in us, not just to make it a flash in the pan and sort of just spend money to spend money, but actually do it in a way that helps these publishers grow in a sustainable manner. For us, sustainable growth is always going to be more important.
Well, and talk about that just for everyone. And I do think most people, especially most people in this room, want to incorporate DEI, want to make sure they're fair, want to to see this within their organization. But it's, this has been your passion.
Yes.
Some are just starting out, some are ahead of the game, some are not even there yet. I mean, there's lots of different levels, but it's not to say that not everyone is maybe wanting to get to a point. So for that person who's just getting going with it, or just really, because you want to do it authentically. I mean, I mentioned that earlier. You don't want to just throw it out there, be a flash in the pan, and then, because then it's even worse. The public will respond to you. Mm-hmm. They get it. They see it.
Oh, yeah.
So what are your biggest recommendations in terms of just making sure that you're making it an authentic and real choice, but actually doing something and making an impact?
I think the importance of iterating and really getting from crawl to run as quickly as you possibly can is super important. Being able to say, today we will just modify our allow list. Tomorrow we will build specific placements to help increase that spend. The day after we will work towards measurement and allowing for the biases that may exist because the spend's not necessarily there that will then downweight against these publishers, to switch that around and say, you know what, we will make a concerted effort to spend X percentage within our media buys, give that a different KPI, and then figure out that new baseline with the mixture of that media, et cetera. So internally, we've set goals for ourselves for what we want to spend, how we want to spend it. And then on top of that, which this becomes then the harder part, is working with all of these publishers by size, having those conversations, saying, well, are you considering this? Should you do this way? And then we sort of graduate them. We think of it as like a graduate program. You start with the allow list, we prove out the measurement, we see the value, it generates what we need from a media perspective. We move into building that framework and strategic relationship, and then eventually, if they're large enough or if we view their growth, then we start setting up PMPs and direct one-on-one relationships with these folks, because that's what's important, that sustainable growth, that pragmatic approach, but you have to take that first step. And that first step is add the domain to your allow list.
Right. And it sounds like, and the way you're talking about it, it's not just within, like you can do it within your company or within your corporation, but it has to expand out. Who you're dealing with, who you're willing to work with. All of that comes into play.
Correct. We even force our agencies to think the same exact way that we do. So we have conversations with our agencies and say, how are you thinking about DE&I spend? How is it sustainable? Where is it sitting on our plans? Why did you offer this person as a suggestion? Where is the fit? Where are the lines that you're sort of blurring a little bit that we think we can play in with this partner?
Are those your I mean, because there are challenges in getting, one, people to think differently. Two, it's probably an investment in terms of financial investment, people investment, all of these things. That's one challenge. Are there other challenges, and how are you getting around that?
I think, as I mentioned before, tech is probably a challenge. So the measurement of some of these partners it gives a little bit of a manual nature to being able to look at what they're offering to us. Being able to, again, brand safety is important for us. We are probably the most conservative in market. So finding that area where we can allow for this growth within DE&I spend has been sort of that really great place where we've figured out the rules so that we're still hitting brand safety, but we're still also helping the industry from the DE&I lens. I would also say dealing with opinions that may not necessarily match is going to be similar. But I think for us, we would prefer to lead and give the recommendation and then be proven wrong or given really great ways to pivot than being leaned back and allowing for, at the end of the day, DE&I sort of going away. It's less of a buzzword now. Everybody's sort of like, all right, great. We sort of checked a box. And for us, we're like, no, this is part of what we do. And it's bringing everybody back to that. This is a core part of what we do. It's very important.
Well, and I would think an argument could be, it's not just, the right thing, but also it makes sense business-wise. Yes. I mean, everyone out there, look, even just our audience and just anywhere you go, there's diversity out there and all different thoughts and all different ideas, and you want to reach everyone. So if you can't get them on do what's right, how about do what's going to make your money?
Agreed. These are probably audiences that we might not have been reaching prior. So there are cities where we don't reach in terms of audience, but this allows for us to get in there, get data, be able to then help it inform our creative strategies, what we're doing, what we're building, even asset types, and sort of looking at what the true look of our world is, because we are a bank that is not just the US, looking at the world and how that audience is built and being able to then extend out to places that we may not be right now.
Makes sense. Okay, so we got to go back to the buzzword, AI.
Okay.
Now, where does that fit in? Is there concerns there? How does it help?
Again, a lot of the work that when we think about AI, we think about it through the lens of modeling and obviously recommendations from a large data set perspective. And then we also think about AI from the sense of automation and helping make efficient decisions. So for us, the way that we're looking at it within the DE&I space is mainly how we can take all of these things that I said are very manual in nature, automate them a little bit more, be able to, rather than at the base, again, getting a recommendation to add 500 sites to our allow list. I feel guilty punting that to my team and telling them manually vet these sites. But instead, we can have AI do that for us. We can have it say, what is the content on this site? What do we think from a brand safety perspective will happen if we run media? And then we use that as the baseline to continue forward.
Well, and that's part of even, I know 2 years ago, now people have definitely changing their minds or evolving to it. But when AI was first being, and I know that's not when it first came out, I mean, it's been around, but when AI was first becoming this buzzword, that was a concern that, you're getting targeting the wrong audience. What are you sharing, and is it coming out the way you want it? Because we definitely saw a lot of missteps. Yep. So obviously, not only in DEI, but in general, how are you sort of protecting yourself on that? Because you want that innovation. You want, as you said, you want to save your staff and not have to do a million things that they can do quickly with automation.
Correct.
But at the same point, you want to see the right stuff out there.
So I think there is always going to be an aspect. I know the joke is cracked all the time that, AI is going to take all of our jobs. I don't think it's going to take our jobs. I think it's going to make our lives easier. In the lens of, there is still always going to be that human element, that need to QA or check the outputs against what you know best. You can't replace a subject matter expert's thoughts, historicals, that knowledge. So I think being able to use this AI to give you that first pass, sometimes that second pass and refinement, and then being able to have someone come in and say, this does make sense, or let me tweak it slightly, put that back in the model again, test what the scenarios are in the output. I think that iterative approach to AI is what's going to be really important. It's going to remove some of that burden from each person, which I think is very important because we do work a lot, but I don't think it's going to replace the human.
You still need that human touch.
Yes.
Make sure that not only just in looking at it, because as we've seen, past images have not been very positive, and they went out there with, obviously, if someone did look at it, then that person should have been.
we messed around with creative builds in AI, and it was comedic. So
it needs to be
4 arms and
right, but it needs to definitely be that. I think everyone has always keep agreeing, and so many people can go, we still have a job.
Yes.
What, in terms of just looking at what you've been doing and what you've been learning, because it is constantly changing. What is the biggest learning, or the key learning that you have that you can take away, that you would want to say, if you can only do one thing, this is it?
Oh my. I would probably say, in specific, knowing that we're talking about data and programmatic, and it's not necessarily what we've been talking about so far, but I think for us, what we've really been focused on, again, is back to those 2 pillars. Brand safety for us as a firm, and then brand safety as it pertains to the audiences that we're looking to reach and keeping the consumer safe. So really what our main focus has been is, how are we making sure that we're using data, that we're applying pixels, that we're doing all of these things that not just keep us safe as a firm and, allow for regulators or whomever else to not worry about how we're using this data for media, but then more importantly, that there's no perception that the user has, and that we're trying to stay ahead of that. Because at the end of the day for us, a consumer having a beneficial opinion of us is worth its weight in gold. And whatever we can do to keep that consumer safe while still trying to innovate, while still being able to find them in places we weren't expecting to find them, is always going to be the most important thing to us.
And when you're using that data, I mean, is it predominantly first-party data? Do you rely on partners, or?
We mainly use first-party data. There's a little bit of third-party that we dabble in from time to time, or we supplement our existing data in order to reach the consumers that we need to.
So, and talking about, so you have that data stored up, but as we've been talking about, the world is expanding. We're having more people. We're needing even that more data. And so moving forward, what do you see Chase doing? JP, I know I keep saying Chase and JPMorganChase.
Yes.
What do you see yourselves doing to take advantage of even the data outside your world? Because that is necessary if you want to expand your customer base, yes, but still doing it with safety in mind and everything else.
We do spend a lot of time vetting the way that data providers and partners collect their data, use their data, not to get super techie in terms of, we're not techie, but legalese, if you will, service provider language, data provider addendums. We spend a lot of time vetting the relationship first before we then use said data. It is very rare that we'll probably use third-party data in and of itself. We will probably stitch it together with our own data. And then I think on top of that, we also have a lot of compliance and controls partners that we work with. So what for other people, and I sometimes get jealous, what for other people, it could take them 3 weeks to launch a new data provider. It may take us longer because we just have to run it through the right governing bodies to make sure that we're not mistakenly targeting or excluding folks or introducing a biases that we didn't expect.
Got it. Well, I have one more question, then I'll open it up to any of you who have a question for Melissa. But I asked a little bit about future in terms of collecting more data, but what are you most excited about? Like, what's new and coming? Maybe it's not even there yet, or maybe it's on the horizon. What are you looking forward to for next year?
For us, and I'm saying this because we literally probably just came out of our upfront negotiations, et cetera. We took a lot of our streaming in-house, and we now manage the streaming buying for our firm. For us, what we're really looking forward to is really expanding out the measurement approach of that, and then finding ways that we can pull in more data from the bid stream. I also think a couple other areas that we are excited about is extending it further into the use of data, as well as how we're going to evolve our shop to really focus on honing in on those down funnel metrics that historically we haven't been able to bubble up, so that we can really get more proximate and agile in the way that we optimize media.
Awesome. So, Corey, are we ready with the microphone? Any questions?
I got really chatty for a second. Haven't seen Helen in a long time. All right, so I got a question for you. You're in a big company, and you're dealing with a lot of issues that a lot of companies, both big and small, have to deal with. So diversity, AI, data. How do you prep your team? How do you prep the people around you to deal with all these issues, which in many cases, you're going to get pushback from finance. You're going to get pushback from all these other groups. Plus, as you just said, the element of patience that you have to be able to onboard new partners. I know most of these people in this room, myself included, we go batshit crazy trying to figure out how we can get through this process. How do you coach your teams? How do you do it?
A couple different ways. One, I remind them that it used to take a whole lot longer to do what we do. The joke for a while was it took us 3 years in order to get anything onboarded. I think we've made really great strides in being able to do that faster. I also told them that it's really important to develop those partnerships with those teams. Being able to have a relationship with our controls partners, being able to be really close to our risk folks, our compliance folks, allows to build that relationship where when we come to them, we've educated them on what we do, so it gets through faster. You don't have to explain Media 101 if they've already spent enough time with you and you've already explained it to them. So for us, I've said, take that time, build that relationship, and then as you're going along, make sure everything is grounded in science and data, not thoughts, feelings, and the squishiness.
And I think that last point's really valuable too, because you're hiring a lot of people who are younger. They don't have the experience level. They may think things have to operate faster, and you have to almost empower them to say, look, it's not you. It's the process itself. Go with it. Just work with it.
I do somewhat coach folks who come over, especially from agency side. I'm like, I know that like it was sprint all the time. Enjoy your life. Give yourself that work-life balance. It's gonna take a while now. Enjoy that.
It's rare.
Agreed.
What other questions do we have? Oh, we got one down in front. Hold on a second. All right. Name and company.
Hey, how you doing? I have two questions for you.
What is your name and where are you working?
Sorry, my apologies. My name is Neil. I'm from NBC. I used to work at a company called Cardlytics, so this space is super interesting to me. But can you kind of talk about what inventory sources you're tapping into? And then secondly, are you providing closed funnel attribution for spending data?
Sure. When we think about the inventory sources, so I'll answer that two ways. One, we try to get as close to each of the partners as we possibly can. So for us, being able to be super transparent, work with publishers and partners anytime we can is super important. In terms of the asset types that we're running, we really do run the gamut. Anything that is available programmatically to transact against, we will do so. So we will run, like I said, streaming is, we've taken a lot of that over, display, rest of the video world, audio, we extend into some of the interesting ad units that are available from a programmatic lens. We generally don't lean too heavily into that because I think we've got some larger content sponsorships that we do from a direct perspective that are probably, going to drive and move the needle a little bit more.
Coming. Where is it? We're here?
I didn't answer your second question, I realize. In terms of closed loop attribution, et cetera, for us, I'm not going to fully speak to that because that starts to err into areas that I'm not allowed to talk about. But we do really try to do everything that we can from a measurement approach to get as far down funnel as we possibly can to where the actual user, or the consumer rather, is signing up, opening an account, using the cards that they may open.
Hi, good morning. I'm Maggie. I work at Butler Till. I have two questions if you're willing to answer them.
Sure.
The first is, are you willing to share what your spend or impression goals are and where you're at? And also how do you staff people to have those direct one-to-one publisher conversations and relationship building?
Sure. So I wish that I could tell you we are a massive bank with, tens of different products. We're also a tech company. We also have acquisitions, and we run the gamut across everything. I will say that the optimizations and the strides and the innovation that we've made recently have really allowed for us to way overblow our goals to the point where I've had awkward conversations with our brand safety provider because we way overshot impressions. So I think what we're doing it has been working. We haven't seen degradation in performance, but we have grown substantially in terms of the number of impressions that we serve to tantamount to tens of billions a year is what we serve.
Okay. Got another one over here.
Staffing.
I was thinking about how to answer that one. So when we're thinking about staffing folks, there's a couple different things. Is we really do have a great onboarding program for new staff members. We really put them through the rigor of not just, I trust that they know how to buy media. What we focus on is how to buy media for the firm. And what we really try to do is instill in them the importance of routines, the importance of processes, the importance of documenting the decisions that we're making. Because a year from now, they may have moved off and they may be on the LOB side, but whoever comes in after them, they need to know the history. So for us, it's super important that anyone that we bring in is willing to learn media for the firm, and that sometimes that's incongruent to what media is. So it's always interesting, we get on the phone with partners, and the first question that partners will ask is, do you really want to do PMPs? And we go, yes, a large portion of the media that we buy is in fact PMP or PG deals, which is a little bit different than when you're agency side.
Over here. I'm Melissa Montgomery from Sling.
Where?
Over here. Next.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
No, it's out over there, right?
You mentioned the foray into streaming and you're taking it in-house. How are you applying your brand safety standards in this space? Because it used to be a pretty small sandbox, and now it's quite crowded.
It's massive, yes. So a couple different ways. We are obviously using what we have off the shelf. We are also signing up for additional products that allow for us to get down to that genre level, that show level. We've always been very, I'm going to say it over and over again, but we've been very conservative in our approach to buying, whether it was direct or if it was programmatic. So for us, moving it over, we had a level of understanding and expectation from brand safety to be able to work off of. And we've now been sort of playing in the space. As we increase our ability to measure, we then focus on how can we extend out further.
Over here. Hey, Melissa. Hi. Jeremy at Dell Technologies. Congratulations on your sweepstakes. We're also a very conservative brand when it comes to trying new things. How have you, and similar to the question that was just asked, but how have you seen this shift from when you're doing more in-house, and how did that relationship working with your legal, compliance, and risk teams, did that change in some way? Because that's what we're kind of falling into, because now the risk is more on the brand than ever as you're doing this in-house.
I think, and again, I'll sort of bring it back to what I was saying in terms of the relationship building. We have built a cachet with those teams that have allowed for them to have a level of trust. And we really think about building a proof of concept in a way that gives them that comfort. So we have that discourse before we decide to do a proof of concept. We answer all of their questions, and then we build that feedback loop along the way. So if we have success with the proof of concept, we'll tell them what our rollout plan is. They have the ability to ask more questions, and then we tell them when the rollout is done. They get a very beautiful media bulletin that tells them we did great work, and that allows for them to be at the forefront of knowing what we're doing. So should something happen in the other side of the bank, or an article comes out, they can go, oh yeah, we knew about this thing, and bring up the email. And they can have conversations on our behalf, which I think for them empowers them, makes them more comfortable, it builds that relationship, and it just makes it a whole lot easier across the board.
Thank you.
All right. Say thank you very much for the panel with Melissa.
Thank you.